Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into some fascinating source material. It's all centered around this idea called the expectation of a revelation.
Right. And our main source here is a transcript from Clif High, a YouTube video transcript. It's looking at how we might pick up on signals about the future,
Hmm.
connecting things that seem kind of separate, like psychics, market stuff, big societal changes.
Yeah, seemingly separate. So our goal, our mission for this deep dive, basically to unpack what this source is saying, the core concepts, understand the connections it's making between these signals, how they might link up, and figure out what it all might mean for, how we see reality and maybe what's coming. Think of it getting the rundown, a shortcut to getting informed on this particular perspective presented in the material.
Okay, so the source kicks off describing its analytical approach,
Hmm.
how it looks at reality. It uses this analogy, like a scientist may be focusing super intensely on just one thing, say, jellyfish.
Right, to understand the bigger picture.
Exactly. Study one part deeply to learn about the whole complex system.
But the source says its fascination isn't jellyfish, obviously.
No, it's time. And aspects of reality that give off what it calls qualia.
Qualia. So these are like hints about what's coming.
That's the idea. Subtle impressions, signals. And importantly, the source claims it tries to do this using frameworks, a kind of rigor borrowed from a scientific understanding, attempting to apply the scientific method or parts of it to reading these signals.
Which is a challenging idea, applying scientific method to, well, hints about the future. Okay, so building on that, let's unpack this concept the source calls the secrets revealed period. What is that, according to the source?
Well, the source describes it as a pretty long period. We're talking decades.
Decades. Wow. Why so long?
Because, according to the source, there are just a lot of secrets to be uncovered, a significant number. And it's not just surface stuff, like politicians or the usual UFO talk. It says it's about secrets at a much, much deeper level, foundational stuff.
Okay, deeper secrets. And the source connects this period to something else big, right?
Yes, a huge innovation boom. That's the prediction tied to it.
An innovation boom. Interesting. And it also says we're in this period now.
Right now. And not just in it, but specifically at a key turning point within it. That's the claim.
A turning point. Okay, so the source then shifts focus a bit, doesn't it? Talks about psychic phenomena.
It does. It spends quite a bit of time analyzing psychic ability based on interactions with someone it calls Heidi, described as psychic.
And this source seems pretty certain about her abilities, no doubt expressed there.
Not at all. It mentions specific experiences, observations,
Yeah.
saying she's really in tune. That's the quote.
Really in tune. Okay.
And it also notes something interesting, that psychics, in its experience, tend to kind of find each other, connect with other psychics.
Right. So here's where it gets really interesting, theoretically.
Yeah, the source poses this core question about how these psychic impressions, these qualia, actually work. Where do they come from?
Okay.
Are they received directly from the underlying structure of reality, what the source calls the ontology, like a direct data feed?
Or are they more a result of the psychic being just incredibly tuned in, tied really closely to the event stream? The actual way things are unfolding second by second.
Okay, that's a subtle but important difference. Ontology versus event stream. Does the source explain that more?
It uses an analogy. Think of it like golf.
Golf, okay.
Getting qualia from the ontology is like having a pro caddy tell you everything.
Mm.
The course layout, the wind, the best club, direct info about the whole system.
Gotcha. Like inside information.
Exactly. But being tied to the event stream, that's more like the golfer themselves standing there, reading the green, feeling the wind on their face, interpreting the immediate conditions right in front of them.
Ah, I see. Different ways of knowing the same course, or reality. One is top-down info, the other is ground-level reading.
Precisely. And the source, based on its observations, it leans towards the second idea.
The event stream one.
Yeah, that psychics are more closely tied to that immediate unfolding, the event stream, rather than getting direct downloads from the fundamental ontology. Interesting. And what else did the source observe about psychics? Something about using their ability for themselves.
Right. It noted that often really good psychics seem to have difficulty effectively using their abilities for their own benefit, compared to reading for others.
Huh. Why would that be? Did the source speculate?
It suggested maybe it's a kind of built-in governor to prevent them getting too self-absorbed or using it purely selfishly. Like the tool itself is hard to turn inward when they're in that psychic mode.
That's quite a thought. Okay, so if psychics are tied to the event stream, And interactions matter.
Then the source suggests paying close attention to interactions with a psychic person like this Heidi can itself be a way qualia gets delivered.
Like the interaction itself is the signal.
Potentially.
Hmm.
Their impressions, even casual comments, might carry these hints, sometimes unintentionally.
Okay, give us an example from the source. How did that play out?
Sure. The source describes talking about a specific kind of obscure subject with Heidi one day, and then claims that literally the very next day, a really clear, unmistakable example of that exact subject popped up in her life.
Wow, that's fast.
Right. So the source analyzed that. Was the ontology prepping them by seeding the conversation? Or was her connection to the event stream just so tight that the manifestation happened almost immediately after the discussion?
And it leaned towards the event stream again.
Yeah, because of the speed. It seemed more like a near immediate reflection of the unfolding reality she was tapped into.
Okay. The source also mentioned another earlier example, something about plane crashes.
Yes, briefly. It mentioned a time much earlier where discussions seemed to be followed the next day by reports of plane crashes. But importantly, the source dismissed that specific instance as likely coincidence, not caused by their talks.
Got it. So focusing on interactions as a source of these qualia, what was the big recurring signal the source picked up on?
The standout signal, the one the source really flags as significant, was this psychic person's consistently negative reaction to silver.
Negative. How so?
Yeah, the source says this person would frequently dismiss or give them shit about their focus on silver, calling it old or a relic, just a rock, things like that.
Just dissing silver constantly.
Pretty much. But here's the key insight from the source. It interpreted even this negative focus, this persistent dismissal, as a really significant qualia, a signal precisely because it kept happening.
Okay, that's counterintuitive. Usually you look for positive signs. Why did this negative focus matter so much?
Because, according to the source, it was this constant background noise, this negative drumbeat about silver. And then suddenly, in early June, right in this secrets revealed period, silver started to, quote, pop.
Pop, meaning the price shot up. Market activity.
Exactly. A sudden, significant move upwards in the market.
Ah, okay. So the negative signal preceded the positive move, and the source ties this current silver activity back to older work.
It does. It references analysis from decades ago. Old alter reports, it calls them, from before 9/11, and claims those old reports outline specific conditions concerning silver.
That are supposedly being met right now.
That's the assertion, yes.
Okay. What were those conditions, according to the source's recollection of those reports?
Several things. First, the degradation of the U.S. dollar.
Check. Seems plausible.
Then, increasing strain between the price of silver and gold, the relationship getting out of whack.
Okay.
Also, a growing demand for silver for what the source calls technical use, something beyond just typical industrial stuff like solder for solar panels, something new.
Technical use. And the last one.
The end of what the source terms silver suppression. The idea that silver's price has been artificially held down and that this suppression is ending now as part of the bigger secrets revealed dynamic.
Right. The secrets coming out include the truth about silver in this view. So why is silver so important now? What's this technical use?
This is where it connects to the bigger picture the source paints. It states that potential future tech, the really big revelations it expects, specifically mentioning UFO issues, ZPT, and zero-point technology-free energy.
ZPT. 0 point. Okay, that sounds like sci-fi stuff.
It does. The source presents these as advanced energy or maybe propulsion systems and claims they will all require silver, not just for solder, but fundamentally.
And it links this to UFO issues with the breakaway civilization. What's that?
The source uses that term, breakaway civilization, seemingly referring to a hidden group with advanced tech, possibly off-world related. The idea is these revelations and the tech are intertwined, and silver is key.
Wow, okay, that's a leap. Does the source mention anything else about silver itself?
Yeah, a couple things. It notes silver has sometimes been called a psychic metal, implying some kind of special sensitivity.
Psychic metal, interesting.
And it points out a physical property. Silver has 2 stable isotopes, one much rarer than the other, unlike gold, which only has 1. Whether that's significant, it doesn't fully elaborate, but it notes the difference.
Okay. Any other factors mentioned? Geopolitics.
Briefly. The source touches on it, yeah. Notes that countries like Mexico have large silver reserves and sort of speculates on how that might play into future demand and value if these predicted tech and societal shifts happen. Just presented as a thought from the source on implications.
Got it. So, pulling it all together, The source sees this current moment as a convergence point.
Exactly. A confluence of these temporal markers, as it calls them. The secrets period, the psychic signals, the silver action, all coming together now.
And while the whole secrets revealed thing is decades long.
Right. But the source emphasizes the next couple of years are going to be, quote, really intense. Especially, it suggests, for people who aren't sort of prepared for these kinds of revelations.
Intense how and when specifically?
It flags June and July this summer as particularly intense, expects rising tension, and then in July, a sharp uptick to a much higher level of intensity.
Driven by what?
By the feeling, the growing awareness that secrets are being revealed, that sense of things coming out into the open.
And this period includes those big things, the UFO breakaway civilization stuff and the silver breakout.
That's what the source anticipates, yes. All part of this intense phase.
And it calls this whole shift moving into
Sci-fi world. That's the term used. The idea that things that sounded like fiction are becoming, or are about to become, are actual reality.
So technological and informational shifts, what about the social side?
Oh yeah, that's expected to intensify too.
Mm-hmm.
The source uses some strong language, says the social order is getting batshit and will get even more intense through the summer.
Batshit, okay.
Yeah.
Does it connect that to anything specific?
It partly links the rising tension to geopolitical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
NATO and Russia are mentioned as examples in the source material. But interestingly, the source also states it doesn't actually think a major conflict will erupt.
So not necessarily war, but the tension itself.
Exactly. The tension is the key driver propelling the social changes, according to this view.
And it has a name for this summer period.
Calls it the summer of emergence, the time when all this shit comes on out, to use its phrasing, marking a clear line between a pre- and post-sci-fi world emergence.
Propelled by silver was the claim.
Yes, silver is presented as a key physical marker or even driver of this whole emergence phase.
Okay, wow. That's a lot to take in. So let's try to summarize the takeaway here according to the source's perspective.
Well, the core message seems to be, we're supposedly in this profound period where huge secrets are coming out. Reality-altering stuff, potentially. And that subtle signals, these qualia, even weird ones, like someone constantly dissing silver, might actually be hints about massive shifts on the horizon.
Like the reemergence of silver as critically important.
Right. And all this is contributing to a move into something the source calls sci-fi world.
So the source suggests you should, pay attention to these subtle signals, even negative ones.
That seems to be the implication, that these signals, even if they seem odd or negative, could indicate really big underlying shifts and maybe point towards future events.
It's definitely a perspective that invites you, the listener, to look at the world around you maybe a bit differently, to see if you can spot any of these qualia or connections the source is talking about in your own life, your own experience.
Yeah, and it really leaves you with a provocative question, based on what the source puts forward. If things like seemingly random events or interactions with people or even persistent negative feelings about something could, in this view, offer hints about huge transformative changes coming, well, how might paying closer attention to those less obvious signals in your own reality give you a different kind of understanding, maybe deeper, maybe just unconventional of the world that seems to be shifting all around us?